Skogbrannsommeren 2018 var, som dere vet, bedre enn de aller fleste, den mest krevende i Norge i moderne tid. Flere hundre branner, 22 helikopter i lufta, og en formidabel innsats fra brannmannskaper, Sivilforsvaret, frivillige og ikke minst apparatet bak. Det var 2018. Det var ille, det var ekstremt, det var krevende. Men som Nils Erik Hågenrud sa, midt oppi det hele så hadde vi flaks også. Men hva med fremtiden? Meteorologene har jo, som dere sikkert har registrert, varslet at kommende somre kommer til å bli tørre, fryktelig tørre, avbrutt av styrtregn. Og det betyr jo mange skogbranner og mer flom, kanskje skred. Og en total som da skaper store utfordringer for oss alle. Og som om ikke dette var nok, så finnes det altså personer som mener at vi ikke bare må forberede oss på mange branner i fremtiden, men brannene kan også bli langt heftigere enn det vi har sett foreløpig. Stikkordet nå er megabranner. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Marc Castellnou. He's a wildfire analyst and associate professor at the University of Lleida in Catalonia in Spain. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, thanks for inviting me, and good afternoon. I will try to provide a presentation about lessons we've learned the last years in a fire spread in worldwide mainly, but also in Western Europe, and how that applies to you. So Uwe asked me just to explain where we are and where we are going, and I'll try to do my best. I am an incident commander. I work in a small fire service in Catalonia. That's Barcelona area, and it's a fire service of 5,000 firefighters, and we've been dealing with forest fires for a long time. And also I'm part of the European Civil Protection Mechanism of Europe as a forest fire expert. Well, what you see in that picture, that's a fire 1 hour after starting in Portugal, 15th of October 2017. That's one of the worst fire scenarios we've seen on Earth in the last years. Just some numbers. 220,000 hectares in 7 hours. Not 20,000 hectares like in Sweden last summer. 220,000. 7 hours, not 2 months. That's what those fires were burning. It can look to you, crazy thing, never will happen to me. Well, hopefully. But that's what we are trying to understand what's happening. And when I talk Portugal, just think about which is the wettest country in the Mediterranean. It's Portugal, because it's the Atlantic country. What happened in Portugal? They get a lot of rain every year, but suddenly they get June and July really dry. So mild winters, dry summers. That's the worst combinations. And that's what we can see in the climate change in the whole Central and Northern Europe. But anyway, we'll go for it. So we live in a country, we've been fighting fires for a long, long time. I haven't come here to explain you and teach you anything. I cannot teach you any lesson. All I can tell you it's what I've learned. And so from that, you can take your own lessons or your understanding. You know your reality. I don't know it. So I'm not here teaching anything. I'm just explaining the mistakes we've done, the lessons we've learned, where we are heading. So we've been fighting fires in forests like your ones a long time ago. And our fires used to be easy. And then we decided to fight them really hard. We chose the path of building up resources and just try to kill any fire we see. 40 years later, what we have is that. That's a firestorm. As you can see there, you can see the lining up there from the cloud, from the smoke column, and that's a firestorm generated in Portugal in June 2017. It was the worst and the first firestorm we've seen in Europe, and it's a no-wind dependent storm. So wind is not part of that equation. It's only forest and dry conditions. So the other thing that is part of that equation is that we are a fire and rescue service. We need to protect our own people. And the mistake we do is that we don't know the cost of opportunity of our operation. So in that fire, if we look at that, that's the light, yeah. That fire, just protecting the homes is the more important thing, but if you don't stop the fire from opening in this right flank, you will keep burning homes and homes. So that fire, when we arrived there, that's 12 minutes after the starting of the fire, we were having almost 9 houses already getting ready to burn. And just to protect those 9 houses, we end up losing 64. So the cost of opportunity on operations, it means just apply the tactics just to avoid your fire service collapse and just to be able to keep protecting your people, because there is no sense on trying your best to protect what you are already losing and not doing anything to avoid losing something else. And when fire is burning faster than we can fight it, and fire is burning with more intensity than we can fight it, then we as a fire and rescue service, we tend to try and keep trying, and not just to think smart, what we can do and what we cannot do. So ask ours, what the fire can do and what can I do to stop it, instead of trying our best. So that problem and dealing with that problem of values, that goes first, is at the bottom line of creating the big problem of wildfires worldwide. It doesn't matter if it's California, if it's Mediterranean, if it's South Africa, if it's Australia. So being a fire and rescue service, trying to do business as usual worldwide has created a situation of building up resources, of buying more planes, buying more engines, buying a lot more toys to play with to fight a fire. We cannot fight with toys anymore. So that's the issue, and that's the problem. And just to express that, just look at those numbers. Those are 3 of the biggest fires of 2017. The Thomas fires in California, the Las Máquinas fires in Chile, and the Portugal 15th of October. And this is not wrong. Those are hectares per day of a single fire. More than 100,000 hectares per day. And the big fires of California, they were 30,000. So we are just deep, deep, deep into trouble worldwide. The problem is that this is not happening at the same place, at the same time. So it happens in Fort McMurray in Canada, May 2016, then January 2017 in Chile, then June 2017 in South Africa, June 2017 in Portugal. Then we went back to October, California, then back to South Africa in June again, then back to California, and then back to Greece, and then all the Northern Europe country. So not a single fire service is having enough experience in those events to try to learn a lesson. We need to look at that globally to try to learn that. And that's what we are doing, just comparing all the different events that has been creating problems. But what is happening really? What it really is happening is that if you look at the energy a fire is releasing, there is a limit. The limit of 4,000 kilowatts per meter, which is the black line, is the limit we can fight as a single engine. With our hose lines, with our equipment, with our helmet, an engine can fight 4,000 kilowatts per meter flame fires. If we combine all the efforts of those airplanes, helicopters, and everything, we can go up to 10,000 kilowatts per meter, but no more than that. Why? Because more than 10,000 kilowatts per meter means a lot of radiation to produce burns on my skin below my firefighter clothes. So it's something we cannot confront anymore. So that's what a fire it's creating. But the huge amount of energy, which is 90,000 kilowatts per meter, depends on 3 tons per hectare available. But in the same conditions, just 10 tons per hectare, under the same weather, the same type of forest, the same everything, will produce a lot less energy. So the amount of fuel available is the driving force behind that. Of course, climate change is releasing those fires. But under the same weather conditions, it will depend on the amount of fuel available in our forest to create conditions we can fight or we cannot fight. That's the issue. So it's not a matter of resources. It's a matter of landscape. It's a question of landscape. So the same landscape with all the planes in the world available, they are above 10,000 kilowatts per meter, nothing you can do. You not even can approach that. And the other thing that is at the bottom of these fires is that they are changing the way we think. This is the map in Portugal of the people that die. Normally, and the yellow one is the fire in June, and the orange one are the fires in October. In June, every people that died in that fire died in the road, and all together. It was a single fire event or a storm. And that's something that's predictable. We could explain. So 11% of the people died at homes, the rest died running away from the fire. That's a behavior we can understand. But in October, everybody was burning that died in those fires, almost 50 people, they died at home. Why? 50% of the people died at home because the intensity of those fires was so impressive, more than 138,000 kilowatts per meter, that the fire was breaking into homes almost 300 meters before the flames arrived to that home. So how on earth we can end up with those fire events? I am an incident commander. I've been in charge for fighting fires for the last 3 years. And I'm incident commander in charge of the fires since 21 years right now. So my whole life fighting fires and being worldwide. And the reason to arrive to that is a simple one. We've been fighting flames, but not fighting fires. So we've been looking at the flames and attacking the flames, but not understanding what was going on in the landscape, not understanding how we were building up the fields in the landscape, and not understanding how socioeconomic change and climate change was helping that field build up to be in our landscape. And we firefighters were proud of having the new helicopter, the new plane, and the new engine. I don't say we don't need resources, we need them. But the most important thing we need is a firefighter, a very well-trained and knowledgeable firefighter, that he's able to understand the fire, to use the equipment and contain that fire, protecting people. Because what we cannot afford anymore is that picture, fire service collapsing, trying to fight a fire they cannot fight. Why on earth you are trying to do something you cannot do? And doing that, you are failing your people because you're not protecting them anymore. So that's the issue, and that's where we are looking. And that's an example of the important things. When we end up explaining the science that those fires were creating that amount of energy, the science part of fire said, that's impossible, guys, you are wrong. Well, we came down to say, okay, we are not explaining you a theory. We are explaining you the reality. You must explain us how that can happen, because if not, I am sending my firefighters blind to fight fires. And that's the issue. I am on the 3rd season on a row that haven't had a break during winter. So it means climate change is creating a continuous season in the Mediterranean. And I am sending firefighters to fight fires every day. Yesterday I was on a fire. And we don't know exactly what's going on. We cannot do business as usual anymore. Look at that example. That's the wind speed that all the windmills in the Iberian Peninsula detected for a period of time. That was 15th of October, 2017. There was a storm coming to the Atlantic coast. It was hitting Portugal and Spain and then going to Ireland. It was one of those hurricanes, of that long season of hurricanes coming into Europe. It was an outlier. It was not normal path. So that the storm was supposed to be arriving at noon and leaving around 7, 8 in the afternoon. And that was the peak of the sustained winds. The storm was very well detected. Of course, that storm was creating fires. And we expected those fires. And we thought those fires will be wind-driven. But once the storm will be over, we will be able to go in and fight those fires. But look at that, what happened later on. That peak of fire. That peak of fire was created by the fire themselves. It's a lot higher. And it's detected in a circle of 1,000 kilometers away. So those fires are changing conditions. Those fires are changing the atmosphere. And those fires are really, really spreading in a sustained rate of spread. So those fires are spreading for hours and more than 10,000 hectares per hour, which is unbelievable, having a peak of 14,000 hectares per hour. So everything that burned last summer in the northern countries in Europe, burning in 4 or 5 hours in an afternoon. Can you imagine that? We couldn't. We thought that was impossible. What happened there? And that's the important thing. And I want you to understand that important thing. Of course, that's a technical thing. Uwe, tell me, we are not used to those data. We aren't either. So it's difficult for us to understand that. But look at that. That's hectare per hours. And those are 4 different fires. If we try to simulate those fires using the technology we know and the models we know, it's impossible. They tell us that those fires doesn't spread faster than 6, 7 kilometers an hour, which means maybe 2,000 hectares per hour. And that's more or less that we can see here for every single fire. So every fire was behaving more or less with the knowledge. But what happened? So this graphic and that graphic are the same, but this graphic is using every single fire. Look at that. At the moment, green fire makes a peak. When he goes down, the blue goes up and down, the red goes up, then down, then the other goes up, down, and the other goes up, down, the other goes up. What's happening there? That's an engine. One goes up. When it's collapsing, it's creating the wind to push the other up, collapsing, creating the wind to push the other up. They are interacting. What science can understand and can predict is the fire behavior dynamics, how different fires evolve together, how they interact together. Because we haven't seen that before at that huge scale. And that's the problem that's happening in California, in Chile, in Portugal, because remember, all those big fires, they happen concentrated in places. Once they start interacting one with each other, atmosphere, they'll build the conditions to create that unexpected fire behavior. And that's, I go fast, and that's the type of simulations we do. And on the left, you see the simulations without interaction. On the right, the simulations with interaction. And that's the surface that burns with interaction and without interaction. So understanding those processes is important. We can never think again as a fire behavior using the fuels, the weather, and the topography, which is the knowledge we have. We must use the fuel, the weather, the topography, and the fire itself, which is changing the equation constantly. Once we start to think tridimensionally, then we get into this new fire behavior. For the first time in the last 4 years, we firefighters, we are fighting fires that are behaving really far away from the knowledge where we are. Normally, we firefighters, we used to use the knowledge to apply that in a fire. Now we see a reality that it's really different from the knowledge, where the knowledge is. And that's the problem we are facing now. And why that's happening? That's an example of the change of the conditions and weather. When you look at the change, at least in our area, and I've been looking on that for you guys, and I show you what we have found. Those are the conditions of dryness of our forest. That's evolution from the 60s to now. It has been a constant evolution up. It means our temperature has been going up, so constant higher temperature is drying faster. We know that from our usual experience at home with our clothes when we need to dry them. The higher the temperature, the faster they dry. So the same with our forests. But look at that statistical analysis. What happened? Around the 80s, we had a change on the climate. It means the climate in the 80s and the 90s was different from the one before. So that means that our forest was radically drier. And around 2002, we had another change. And now in 2017, we had another change. So in my lifetime as a firefighter, I've been through 4 different climates in terms of dryness in our forest. And in the last 300 years, we've been through 1. So I've seen a lot more climate change in my life as a firefighter than my country have seen since the last 300-400 years. So, and that's creating full availability. And that's when I want to come down to you in this short talk. That's the expected change on temperature for the next years. Look at is the Atlantic coast. Think one thing. Where is Chile? In the west coast, and California in the west coast, and Portugal in the west coast, and the fires in South Africa in the west coast. Why? Because what is changing is the global pattern of humidity getting into the continent, and that's the area where it will dry faster, and it's the area where more people is living, so we are running into trouble. But the big problems happen in the West Coast. Why? Because it's where we get the mild winters, wet, and suddenly, unexpectedly, we are getting the really dry summer. Why? Because Greenland is melting, is creating stable conditions in the Northern Atlantic because the water is cooling down. That's creating high pressure systems, and those high pressure systems are concentrating the air using the Siberia dry mass over us. And that's bringing the dry air over there and doesn't move from there from days. So, synoptically, the weather pattern is formed to create the firestorms in winter and early summer, migrating in the west coast of Europe, and they will look like the Portuguese ones. We were used to see big fires in Spain, in Italy, in Greece, in the dry area of the Mediterranean, not in the wet area of the Mediterranean. In the wet area of the Mediterranean, suddenly we start to see an increase of number of fires. Then we were saying, well, it's not a problem of big fires, it's a problem of number of fires. But then 10 years later, they changed to suddenly some big fires, once every time. And now, in the third change, has been firestorms, never seen before, but globally. That's the pattern. Sounds familiar to you, suddenly changing to a lot of fires? Sounds familiar to me. Sounds familiar to change from long period between fire and then shorter? Sounds familiar to me. That's coming. Everything is set up for that. What's the problem? You guys, you are sitting on the biggest forest in Europe, and your climate is improving. Suddenly you will have better weather, mild weather. Forests will grow faster. Everybody expects that. But you will have longer spells of dry weather. And you have the amount of fuel you have, with the dry weather you have, conditions are set up for firestorms. We cannot teach you anything. We can just explain our history. And our history is exactly that one. We've done those mistakes 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago. We thought we were the best firefighters. We thought we had enough engines. We tried to attack the fire in the head and put it out as soon as possible. We didn't saw anything coming. And suddenly, we are overwhelmed. We are, America is, Australia is, South Africa is, everybody is overwhelmed because we get the wrong path. I don't want to tell you what to do, but the issue is that that's our transition of fire generations. We start with the first generation of fire, was continuity. Suddenly, we had continuous landscape. So we created fire service. Then we go, suddenly we saw fires that were continuous and running fast. That was the second generation of fire. We buy new engines. Then we went to fires that were continuous, fast, and intense. We hire helicopters and planes. That was the third generation. Then suddenly those fires that were continuous, fast, and intense were getting into the wheel and urban interface, burning cabins, houses, getting into towns, burning factories. That was the fourth generation of wildfire. We insist on having a lot more firefighters and a lot more resources, and technology, and simulation, and satellites, and planes. And then suddenly we saw the simultaneity of the big and destroying wildfires that were continuous, fast, intense, and burning wheel in interface, but happening all at the same time at the same place. And we didn't understand anything. We keep insisting on the more resources. And finally, we are in the sixth generation, climate change-driven firestorms. We understood that the problem is not the resources. We need resources, of course, but we need good firefighters that can use them and understand what's going on and try to fight the fire and not the flames of the fire. But what we need is a landscape where we can do our job, where we can protect our people. So it's not in our hands. So we have in our shoulders the responsibility for the big problem, but it's a problem that belongs to the type of landscape we as a society wants to create. And that's what needs to understand. And if we don't invest in avoiding the full loads, we will see bigger and fires in the Northern Europe. And that's an example, really technical, but in the old days, bad weather and good weather. And you see the unmanaged forest, the type of intensity and rate of spread, and the managed forest. So the difference between unmanaged and managed forest was, it was not about the rate of spread, it was about intensity. So I could fight those fires, I was not able to fight those fires. But with the new weather, the difference between and manage forest is the same like if everything was unmanaged before. So climate is pushing the fires not where only to higher intensity, but to higher rate of spread, and that's what's killing us as a firefighter. Because try to answer one thing and tell me tonight at the beer time, how fast do you fight fires? What's the rate of fire line you can sustain for 10 hours in your fire service? That question was made by my father. He was a farmer. He said, I know how many olives I can pick up per day and per worker. Do you know how many fire line you can make your firefighter sustain for the day? If you don't know that, you don't know what fire you can confront. So you will not know when you will fail. And that's the issue. It's not about fighting fire anymore. It's about protecting our society in front of a storm that is coming. And it's climate change. It's a wave. Once the forest will adapt to the new climate, that will disappear. But that wave is running through your country. Your forest is totally unadapted and stressed because conditions are drier and hotter. And he's producing a lot more fuel. And that's the fuel that is feeding those firestorms. We need to understand. So we cannot pretend to keep doing business as usual. We need to understand what's happening. So we need to avoid, or we need to stop looking at where we are and start to understand where we are heading to. That's the important thing. And that's my firefighters, and that we want to say thank you for listening to us.
Thank you, Mark. A couple of questions before you leave.
Well, I will stay around.
Yeah. So, but what you're basically saying is that we haven't seen nothing yet, have we?
No. Well, you have seen a lot of things, but you only can see what you know. So we saw those fires back in '94 and '98, but we didn't knew them. So they were happening in front of us, and we didn't understand anything. And in Sweden and Norway, last summer we saw a lot of things. And the same in 2014. But we have to put the pieces
together
just to understand it. And that's what I am insisting on, that we are investing on that. Because none of us can have enough experience in this problem if we don't share experience. What happened here in Norway last summer, it's important for us, for the Pyrenees and the Alps. We need to share experience that way. None of us can get enough knowledge staying at its own area without a changing experience. So.
What are the odds for a mega fire to hit Norway at some point in the future?
Well, that's a good question. It's not a question of if it can hit or not.
When?
It's a question of when. Last summer, 10% of my wildfire analysts were betting that Norway will show one. We were surprised you were able to avoid it.
Did you lose money?
No, I lost almost 10 pints of beer, but
never mind, Mark. Thank you so much. Pleasure.
Thanks.
A little first aid kit for you
All right,
to bring back to Spain. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.